Hello and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. I'm Cy Kellett, your host. A very, very fine show today. Second hour, you may not know the name, but you're going to love the hour. Jeremy Christensen will join us. So you might know the name if you frequent our podcast, Catholic Answers Focus. But he's got a book out called From the Susquehanna to the Tiber, and it's about it's a memoir of his conversion from Mormonism to the Roman Catholic Church. And he's also just, lots of people have books, but he's a fascinating guy and a wonderful insights into kind of the psychology of conversion, what he went through himself, but also specifically about the move from Mormonism to the Roman Catholic Church. So if that's of interest to you, hang around for the second hour, give a call. He'll be happy to take your calls and we'll have a nice conversation. This hour, why aren't you Catholic? We're just going to hold the lines for people who are not Catholic, and not the kind where you go, well, I actually am Catholic, but I have a friend who's not Catholic. No, we're going to ask you if you're Catholic to wait for another time. If you're not Catholic and you'd like to call and tell us why, we love those conversations, whether it's you have rejected God, you've come to the conclusion there is no God, or maybe Jesus not your cup of tea, and you don't see the reason behind people accepting him as the Son of the living God, or maybe it's the Catholic faith in particular. Maybe you do accept Jesus and the wider church and all of that, but you don't accept the Catholic claims. Whatever it is, you're welcome to call 888-318-7884. We really do enjoy having these conversations, and you really should feel welcome here. 888-318-7884, here to help us have those conversations. Michael Lofton, who many of you know from Reason and Theology, his website, and you can find the videos on YouTube, and wonderful conversations about the faith. Michael himself, a convert to the Catholic faith. Michael Lofton, thanks for being here with us.
Hey, Cy, thanks for having me. It's an honor.
And you're maybe just tell a little bit of your story so that people will know who they're talking to, because we're asking them to call and share their story, why they're not Catholic. Ex-Catholics, by the way, if you consider yourself having left, you're welcome as well, 888-318-7884. But how did you end up in this church that has sometimes been described as here comes everybody?
Yeah. Well, I myself am a convert to the Catholic Church, so I grew up in a Christian household and loosely practiced Christianity in my teens, but like a lot of people do, they kind of tend to go astray whenever they get into their college years. I did that. But at the age of 22, I had a really, really profound experience when I was given a copy of the Bible. I read it cover to cover in less than 1 month, radically changed my life just reading sacred scripture, and I just have not been the same ever since. But I at that time was Protestant, and it took me years of just working through issues of theology and church history, answering objections of questions that I had, to eventually read my way into the Catholic Church, which I did in 2012.
Again, the number 888-318-7884. If you're not a Catholic and you'd like to tell us why, maybe challenge Catholic belief, maybe it's you don't understand something about why Catholics believe this or that, and or maybe it's never occurred to you to be Catholic and you just feel like talking to somebody about it today. 888-318-7884. It's a great time to be Catholic because the church is in chaos. And but it's always a great time to be Catholic because of Jesus. But I mentioned the church in chaos because you have a book that you'll give to people for free called Church Chaos, Michael.
Exactly. If you just go to reasonandtheology.com, you'll see a link pop up with the free PDF book, Church Chaos. You just simply click on it, put in your email, and it gives you the PDF right then and there. Again, no strings attached. It's for free.
888-318-7884 is where you can call here. You want the free book, go to reasonandtheology.com, reasonandtheology.com. And enjoy the stuff. Watch some of the videos. One of the cool things that you do, Michael, is you for example, as a Catholic, so you're discussing reason and theology, but a non-Catholic who we're reaching out to today, they might be watching the video. They can interact with you while you're making the video. It's not like you're just posting this and dropping a bomb and walking away, but people can interact with you while you're making the video.
Yeah, probably 99% of my videos I do live. Every now and then I'll pre-record something and upload it, but that's incredibly rare. I just find it easier to do them live and to answer questions at the end of the stream.
And do people challenge you? Are they like, 'cause
Yeah.
we sometimes get it in our streams where people will just come in and say, this is all fake. You just need to have faith in Jesus and get away from these Catholics. They're deceiving you.
Yeah, I get challenged all the time. And believe it or not, I mean, while I'm going through my streams, I kind of keep an eye on the chat. And when I see somebody offer an objection, I try to interact with it midstream, although I prefer doing it at the end of the stream. Sometimes I'll see something that's necessary to address right then and there.
Why aren't you Catholic? If you're not a Catholic, give us a call, 888-318-7884. Maybe you're not a Catholic because you've never been a Catholic and it never occurred to you. Maybe you're not a Catholic because you left the Catholic Church. Whatever is the maybe you feel that you thought or read your way out of the Catholic Church. You learned, you came upon something that made more sense to you. Whatever the reason is, you're doing us a favor when you call. So please don't feel like you won't be welcome. You are doing us a favor when you call 888-318-7884. Already, let's see. Yeah, well, there's still 2 lines open. I was going to say the lines are filling up, but there are still 2 lines open. Michael, that means folks are ready to talk with you. You ready to talk with them?
Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. Let's go to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where David is listening on 1040 a.m. David, thank you so much for starting us off today. Why aren't you Catholic?
That's a good question. I guess it's because I found my home in the Lutheran Church. I grew up Assembly of God, but with Lutheran relatives, and by Lutheran, not Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, but Wisconsin Evangelical Lutheran Synod. And the comfort of Holy Scripture, which within the Lutheran tradition, we accept much of historic church tradition and the church fathers. And so that's why I'm not Catholic.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that. I mean, when I was Presbyterian, I actually had a pretty good experience as far as comfort with the people and the congregation, stuff like that. So I can relate there, but ultimately for me, it was just that church history, digging into that, because in the Presbyterian communion, much like the Lutherans, they do tend to emphasize church history more than, say, your Baptists, or most Baptists, I should say. And so I started looking into church history, and I noticed a lot of discontinuity between what I believed as a Protestant Presbyterian with what I was seeing in church history. Not that every single thing that you find in the early church is absolutely Orthodox Catholic. No, you can find heresies, you can find people who dissented from the truth in the early church. But I was reading the church fathers and saying that I was in a completely different world, a completely different realm than the church fathers. And Catholicism, and by extension Eastern Orthodoxy, much closer resembled that world of the early church fathers. So it kind of put me on the path of discerning between Eastern Orthodoxy and Catholicism at that point.
Yeah, one of the documents in our Lutheran tradition is the Augsburg Confession, which was presented to Emperor Charles at the Diet of Augsburg, where the Lutheran princes, made their argument that they were still part of the one true Catholic Church, and I believe, and I could be wrong, but I do believe that the late Pope Benedict, he actually called that a Catholic document, which would be a good foundation to go off as far as ecumenical relations go. But something I see with Lutheranism, even versus Presbyterianism, and that would kind of make us more similar to Catholics, is our acceptance of, what do we believe about Holy Communion? What do we believe about baptism? And what does God do for us in those sacraments? Where Presbyterians find symbolism, Lutherans find real things taking place, including the real presence of Jesus within the Eucharist, for us. So I found that interesting. My in-laws are Roman Catholic, and so attended church with them a number of times, and that, and of course, obviously, many similarities, especially in worship, with the Roman Catholics, as our liturgy is from that Western tradition. But ultimately, I guess, there are some things I see in the Catholic tradition that would seem to fly in the face of, and I say fly in the face, that's a little bit strong, that would seem to contradict or not quite line up with Scripture as much.
Well, why don't you give us one of those? That would be interesting to hear what you feel in the Catholic faith doesn't line up with Scripture.
Yeah, so in talk about Mary and not her perpetual virginity, as Lutherans historically, up at least until the 1800s, held to her perpetual virginity. But, Mary's role in salvation, yes, we say she is the mother of God, but how, we are to go, we can't directly go to Jesus. At least that's what I hear in a normal conversation is, we need Mary to go to Jesus. Well, okay, I understand, Mary's, Jesus' mother, and we can look to her for her example and the great service she had towards, in God's plan of salvation, being with the mother of God. But as far as we don't need that mediator between Jesus because he became our brother. So we can go to him directly.
All right, let's Michael, I'd appreciate if you'd respond to that.
Yeah, well, I'm right there and sympathizing with your critique, though, although I'd modify it just a little bit. I agree we can go directly to God in prayer and ask for forgiveness and ask for, petitions and all kinds of things. We can do that, and we should do that. That doesn't, however, take away from the importance and helpfulness that we find through the intercessions of the saints, especially the Blessed Virgin Mary. There's a whole lot of use there in the same way that you might ask your friend who you know to be a holy and righteous person, you might ask them to pray for you. How much more would you ask the saints in heaven to pray for you? But yeah, if you have an understanding that you cannot go to Jesus in prayer directly, you can't go to God and ask him for forgiveness, you can't ask him anything directly without asking through the Virgin Mary, I would agree with you. That's actually a theological error. That is not true. But I don't believe that the Catholic Church teaches that. Now, I do believe you'll find some Catholics who present it that way. I think what they're doing is they're overreacting to some concerns that they find in Protestantism that doesn't see utility in appealing to the intercession of the saints and especially the Virgin Mary. So I think it's more of an overreaction, but it's never anything that I've ever seen the Catholic Church officially teach. Quite the contrary. The Catholic Church puts sacred scripture at the forefront, and everything else serves that. So I agree with you, but I think it's a little bit of a caricature of what the Catholic Church actually teaches.
I'm very grateful for the call, however, and as we go into our first break, and David, we do have to go into this first break. If you'd like, we got a little book called 20 Answers Mary. It's just 20 questions and answers about Mary. If you want it, we'll send it to you, David. Entirely up to you. If you want it, hang on the line. And give us an address. If you don't, we'll talk next time. There's lots of folks on the lines. Michael Lofton is our guest, himself a convert to the Catholic faith, and now runs Reason and Theology, which you can find. Just type in Reason and Theology on the internet. I tried it. It comes up. reasonandtheology.com is the website. And if you are not a Catholic and you'd like to talk about it with Michael, give us a call, 888-318-7884.
Catch Catholic Answers live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Experience the incredible story of the woman who Time magazine named the most influential Catholic woman in the United States. Born Rita Rizzo, the future Mother Angelica grew up in a rough neighborhood in Canton, Ohio. Young Rita experienced abandonment, rejection, and heartache, but God touched her through a woman named Rhoda Wise. Encounter this amazing woman at the Mother Angelica Museum. Plan your visit today at motherangelicamuseum.com.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Save the date. Saturday, August 26th is the day, and Birmingham, Alabama is the place for the 2023 EWTN Family Celebration. We're celebrating Mother Angelica's love for the Eucharist and join us to mark the centennial year of Mother's birth. Make your plans now to attend this free event. More details coming soon at our Family Celebration webpage, EWTN.com/family celebration.
It's always such a fun hour. I'm really glad we get to do it, and I'm very glad we have our good friend Michael Lofton here to do this with us. He is a man of reason and theology, and runs Reason and Theology, which you can find at reasonandtheology.com. But I always feel like we have wonderful apologists, all of whom can do this, but it's fun when folks who have come into the Catholic Church are able to talk about their experience with those who are not or have not yet come into the Catholic Church. You're welcome to call if you're not a Catholic, 888-318-7884. You want to talk about it? Give us a call, 888-318-7884. Going to Charleston, South Carolina now. Mark, listening on 730 a.m. Catholic radio there in Charleston, South Carolina. Mark, go ahead with your, well, I shouldn't say question. I guess the question is from us to you. Why aren't you Catholic?
Well, I kind of think that I am Catholic, but y'all would argue with that. I'm an Anglican priest, and my theology is very, very Catholic. And I'm just curious about Rome recognizes the apostolic succession of the Orthodox Church, but does not recognize ours, and would like to have your thoughts on why that's the case.
Yeah. And I would agree that there's a whole lot of similarities between the Catholic Church and some Anglicans, especially your Anglo-Catholics. I don't know which part of Anglicanism you come with, but I can certainly concede there's a lot of similarities there with certain Anglicans. But as to your question, why do we recognize the orders of, say, some of the old Catholics or Eastern Orthodox or Oriental Orthodox or Assyrian Church of the East, but not a great deal of the Anglicans? There's a very specific reason why. We believe in order to have valid apostolic succession, you have to have the valid matter, that is the tactile succession of laying on of hands to pass on ordination. You have to have that, but in addition to that, you have to have the valid form. And so you can see Leo XIII in the late 1800s analyzing the form or the prayers or the intentions, if you will, the meaning behind what Anglicans were doing with their ordinations, and they themselves did not believe it to be a priestly ordination in the way that we would say is sufficiently orthodox. So for that reason, Pope Leo XIII declared the orders of most Orthodox to be null and void, and in fact, that is something that has been reiterated by even as recent as Cardinal Ratzinger and Bertone, and of course Ratzinger is formerly Benedict XVI. So that's something that was actually reiterated by him in less than 20 years ago, when he points to the invalidity of the orders of Anglicans and Leo XIII and his decision there. But that being said, you might have some Anglicans who have valid orders if they have reintroduced valid apostolic succession into their holy orders through perhaps some of the old Catholics or through Eastern Orthodox. So it's not that every single Anglican doesn't have valid orders, but it's more the ones of the stream that Leo XIII was addressing.
Like 34. So Leo XIII, several hundred years after Anglicanism veered away, makes this decision, but the Anglicans in those early days certainly had 3 bishops that were already duly consecrated by Rome that were creating bishops and ordaining priests. So, I mean, do you know specifically what Leo was saying was the reason why it was invalid when these guys historically point back and say, you know, these are bishops that go back to the bishops that go back to Peter?
Well, what Leo's saying is that some of these orders, they may be able to point to the matter of apostolic succession, like the actual laying on of hands may go back to the apostles, but you have to couple the laying on of hands with the valid form. It's no different than saying, like, okay, if a priest were to take bread and wine and just say, this is Doritos, this is Pepsi, given up for you, is that a valid consecration? Is that the Eucharist? Of course not, because you not only have to have valid matter, bread and wine, you also have to have the valid form, that is the words of consecration. And what Leo is arguing is that he's saying, based on the prayers that these Anglicans were using, they lost the valid form, and therefore, even though they may have a tactile succession, the matter may actually go back to the apostles. The form has been lost. But again, I want to qualify that and say that that's not the case for all Anglicans, because I'm aware of some cases where some Anglicans have reintroduced into their apostolic ordination, into their ordinations, apostolic succession through maybe Eastern Orthodox or Old Catholics.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Much to chew on.
Well, thank you very much. I very, very much appreciate the call, and maybe we'll get the chance to talk again. Boy, lots of folks picked up the phone right away to call, so we have full lines right now, and I'll let you know. Well, probably one line will open up right now, 888-318-7884. But if you're not a Catholic and you want to talk about that with a Catholic apologist and theologian, that would be our guest, Michael Lofton, you are very welcome here, 888-318-7884, going next to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where Jason is listening to EWTN on Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio. Jason, we're very glad you're here. Why aren't you Catholic?
Well, I've called in quite a few times. I'm also an Anglican.
Okay.
I consider myself more Anglo-Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I did, when I was younger, did go to Catholic school from 5th to 8th grade. Then I became evangelical, and they kind of turned me, anti-Catholic. And then I guess part of me wants to become Catholic, but, people are, the Assumption of Mary, and they call Mary the Queen of Heaven, and you pray to these statues and kneel at these statues. So I've studied church history, and then, trying to figure that some of the earliest things, the Feast of Mary go back to like 300 AD, and there's really, you have the early church fathers that talk about her being Theotokos, the mother of God, and the Virgin, but I don't see anything saying that she was assumed or, praying to saints, because they'll tell me, the saints are dead, and I'm like, well, why do some people talk to their dead loved ones, have pictures of loved ones around the house? So that's what's really probably preventing me from being Catholic. And
Well, let's get Jason, I want to get a response from Michael, because that's a lot.
Yeah, a lot going on there.
I apologize.
No, that's fine.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to get more before we got Michael to respond. But Michael?
Yeah. I can certainly sympathize with some of the Marian doctrines. As a Catholic, I believe all of them, but I can understand that you might want to see more attestation to them in the patristic era, at least some of them. I agree. However, I would like to point out, you do have patristic evidence for the Assumption of the Virgin Mary. You do have attestation to this in late 400s, early 500s, and it could also be argued that it's implied in certain scriptures, either typologically in the Old Testament or a little bit more directly in the book of Revelation. So you certainly have those things. But here's what I would ultimately point towards, because when it comes to really anything, how much evidence is really going to be sufficient to convince you, right? Some might argue that there's not enough evidence to show that Jesus actually is one person in two natures in the patristic era until, and then they'll give you a certain time period. And so how much evidence is really going to be sufficient? I think that's going to be a little arbitrary. So here's what I do. Rather than dance around the issue and give you, some points here and there where the Father said this or the Bible says that, I cut to the chase and I go to the issue of authority. If Christ established a Catholic Church with a teaching authority that is able to teach infallibly under certain conditions, and it then does infallibly teach, let's say, the Assumption of the Virgin Mary, then you can already know that has been secured and it's true, even if you can't point to any evidence in sacred scripture. So some of those other things that you may not see enough evidence for in scripture and the church fathers, even though I believe there's evidence there, you may feel like there's not enough there. I point to, well, they all ultimately rest on the teaching authority of the church. Now, how much evidence and authority is there in sacred scripture and the church fathers for the teaching authority of the Catholic magisterium? Plenty of evidence. So when we ultimately look to that and we are secure in those things, then we can see, okay, these things then logically follow, and we can be certain that they are true.
Jason, what do you think of that approach?
Yeah. I mean, again, like, I don't have a problem on the intercession of the saints, or that. I just like people that are not Catholic coming up. Well, you don't, they'll tell me scripture like, come boldly to the throne of grace. We don't have to have the intercession of the saints or Mary. And then there's some call Mary the Queen of Heaven. And I guess that's kind of blasphemous.
We got to go to this break, Jason. Hang on, because I'm not exactly I got to ask you a couple questions when we come back right after this. Want to get right to the core of Christ's saving message? Want a roadmap for living the life Christ calls you to? It's time to look again at the Beatitudes. In his new book, Heart of the Gospel, How the Beatitudes Show Us God's Plan for Happiness, Father Sebastian Walsh demonstrates compellingly how these 8 declarations make up the foundation, the essence, and the final goal of Jesus' teaching. Heart of the Gospel illuminates the scriptural passages from which we get the Beatitudes, explains the significance of their wording, their order, and their timing in Jesus' ministry. And it draws out edifying parallels and connections with salvation history and the lives of the saints. Most importantly, Father Walsh offers wise counsel from his own work as a priest and teacher to help you live the Beatitudes in your own life. Order your copy of Heart of the Gospel today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I love these shows, actually, the Why Aren't You Catholic shows, because we get to talk with so many of our Christian brothers and sisters who are we are so close to. But often there's reasons that I never thought of, or it's just interesting to have the conversations. I also really do like when those who are quite far from the Catholic Church, maybe have rejected belief in God or come from a completely different religious background, call. We haven't had those calls today, but I do want you to feel welcome here, 888-318-7884. Right now we're talking with, and Michael Lofton is our guest, again, just to remind you who the guest is. And right now we're talking with Jason in Pittsburgh, who struggles with with some of the Marian doctrines, but not all. And that's what I was struggling with, Jason. It does seem like some of it you're perfectly fine with, and then other parts of Catholic approach to Mary you do have a problem with. Am I getting the gist of what you're saying, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, like I study it, and then because I've studied church history as being an Anglican. I did go to seminary, and so we do study church history.
Yes.
And so I also went to the Catholic Answers website and looked at that and kind of, hey, what do the early church fathers like Polycarp, Origen, Clement of Rome, Irenaeus, what do they have to say? So
Yes.
it does seem that, Mary, they do recognize Mary as I want to say not authority figure. They call her Theotokos, the mother of God.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you. And there's that respect. But when, when it comes to the bodily assumption, Mary was taken into heaven, full body, and I struggle with that, and then
Well, is there one particular thing that, because I do get the sense of struggle, is there something that Michael can help you with, or one particular thing you would like addressed before we go? Because we do have other calls, but I would like to address your
No,
concern.
I understand. Like, if there's like, besides Catholic Answers, is there resources that I can go and search and
No, Catholic
where I
Answers
can
is
see-
it.
yeah.
We're the best. We're the
Okay.
top. No, I'm only
Okay.
kidding. Michael, give him some other resources.
One that I found helpful when I was still Protestant transitioning to Catholicism came from Catholic Answers. I think it was the Catholic Survival Guide is what it's called.
Oh yeah, that's Patrick Madrid, isn't it? No, that's not
Loved
Patrick
it.
Madrid.
It was a wonderful resource, really thick book, has like a lifeboat on it.
Oh yeah, I thought that was Patrick, but I got it that wrong. We'll find it.
Maybe he contributed to it, but I mean, I found it to be, that was incredibly helpful because it answered like all of the main staple objections. Jimmy Akin also wrote a really good book on the Church Fathers where he gives you patristic attestation to a lot of these things, like the Marian issues. So that's certainly a good resource. But I ultimately kind of want to push it back and say, but how much evidence do you really need in the Church Fathers to prove this for you? Like, how much is enough? I imagine you believe that Jesus has two wills, right? One human, one divine. But you start looking prior to the 6th century. Are you going to find a whole lot of explicit attestation to that? Not necessarily. I'm not saying that they didn't believe it. And I'm not saying that there isn't biblical support for them. I believe that there is. But I would argue the exact same thing for the bodily assumption of the Virgin Mary. And so my question would be like, how much evidence is necessary? And I don't know if you're ever going to find like enough evidence to say, unless there's just like some major consensus among the fathers, that this is somehow enough. But I would point out to the fact that there's probably things that you already believe in there. Those were things that there wasn't a major consensus in the early church about. And so ultimately I rest those things on the teaching authority of the church. How much attestation is there for the reliability of the teaching authority of the church? And there's plenty. And so once you then accept that teaching authority, it logically follows that you accept the things that it teaches, which includes the assumption. So rather than spend a ton of time on the Marian issues, I would spend more time on the questions of ecclesiology, how the church functions and structured, the papacy, those questions. You settle that, you'll settle everything else. But you try to tackle things, one thing here and there, the filioque, this Marian teaching, that thing, that's going to take a lifetime. Cut to the chase and go straight to teaching authority, and that will save you a lot of time.
Jason, the book that Michael mentioned, the Catholic Survival Guide, that is a Catholic Answers book, and I'm happy to send it to you. And I think I associated with Patrick Madrid because it came out when Patrick was here, and he may be a major contributor to it. I'm not exactly sure how that all, but Patrick's, of course, a very important part of the history of Catholic Answers. So if you want that book, the Catholic Survival Guide, hang on, we'll mail it to you. Just give us an address, give Siobhan an address, and we'll send it out to you. Michael Lofton is our guest. What we're asking callers is, why aren't you Catholic? There's one line open if you'd like to get in on that conversation, 888-318-7884. Going down to the Texas Panhandle now, where Hope is listening on St. Valentine Radio. Hope, we're glad you're here. Why aren't you Catholic?
Well, I started the process back in fall of 21, and I was late to class, and I was late to enter the classes, and also I have health issues and transportation issues that influence, that keep me from attending regularly, and especially health issues early in the mornings. And anyway, this was all explained to the director of the class and everything, and he was all understanding and everything. And I did a lot of homework, on my own, and then when it came time for the reconciliation process, the priest seemed to feel like that I had not attended enough masses and was not prepared to go to reconciliation. And in passing, the director mentioned that I might want to go to another parish. And so I just felt very unwelcomed. And because it's not just a fleeting moment, or I'm in my 70s, and it's not because I'm at this stage in my life. when I was 12, I wanted to run away from home and become Catholic. Even years later, I would light candles and pray. Just, different things through my life, trying to make rosary beads out of rose petals.
Wow.
All kinds of things.
Hope, it sounds. I hate to interrupt you, Hope, but I just want to. It does sound like what you're saying is, we Catholics seem to be making it too hard for you to become a Catholic. Is that the feeling that you've ended up with?
No, I think it was a personal issue with the priest.
Ah, okay. All right. Well, let me get a response to Michael on that particular issue then.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back to you, Hope.
Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear about your experience there. I can relate in some ways. I think that we can all say that we've had here and there rough experiences with other humans, just because with humans involved, you have sin involved. I don't know the situation of that priest. What was the line of reasoning? What were the circumstances, details beyond what you're telling me here? So I don't know what was specifically going on with him, but just objectively speaking, yeah, unfortunately, sometimes priests may fail us. I mean, just look at the Old Testament, for instance. With the Old Testament worship of God, you had some priests that were doing really, really, really horrible things in the temple worship. And so when people would come and bring them their sacrifices, they were engaging in all kinds of scandalous things. And so here the people of God were coming to worship God, and then the priests that they're bringing their sacrifices to were doing things that were abominable, right? But that still didn't mean that, the people of Israel shouldn't still continue to worship God and do everything that they can. It just meant that sometimes you have sinners who do bad things. It's no different today. Unfortunately, sometimes you'll find priests who do things that they shouldn't do. Don't let that stop you, though. If you have to maybe look into a different parish, certainly do so. I'll say this. Our initiation process, even though maybe we could still argue that it could be expedited more and maybe made easier, is a whole lot better than the early church. The early church initiation process was rough. And then not only would you undergo an incredibly rigorous initiation process, but then the discipline that you would experience for sin afterwards was incredibly rigorous. So we've gotten really a whole lot better in the last 1700 years. That being said, maybe we could do a little bit better. And I'm sorry that we failed you in that particular instance. Don't let that stand in the way of you worshiping God among his covenant community. In the same way that God expected the Israelites to bring their worship to God, to bring their sacrifices to God, and not to say, well, this priest was a bad person, and not to say, well, for that reason, I'm not going to worship God. In the same way God expected us to still worship him in a particular way in the Old Testament, he does the same thing in the New Covenant, in the New Testament, in this time period. And that's through his Catholic Church. So I'm sorry to hear about that failure, but I certainly look into other options and maybe a different parish that would initiate you.
Found is that we're all human, even priests
Sure.
are human. And
Sure.
and the thing about it is I let it go for a little while because of my situation with my family being very ill. And then I came back to doing what I was doing and saying my rosary. And then I had a kind person over one of y'all's programs told me to start doing the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. And I just find such comfort in that. And it's even helped my blood pressure. My blood pressure will drop over 20 points after I do the Chaplet of Divine Mercy. And I just the thing that I found is that I'm not going to let one person that didn't like me personally influence how I feel in my heart. And I know that some people study for up to 3 or more years to become Catholic, and I don't mind the study. You know what I'm saying? And I understand what you're saying, and I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to keep on trying.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I was going to say, absolutely keep that approach, because even once you're initiated, you'll still encounter people in the church who do things that they shouldn't be doing. Don't let that be a stumbling block for you to do what you need to do, though.
Hope, is there any book of ours that I could send you? I'd love to send you Why We're Catholic, but maybe you've already read that. Is there any book you'd like from us?
Well, the main thing that I have questions about is going through Mother Mary to get to to my Lord and Savior. That's the problem. One of the and I think that's just from being raised Protestant, and because I've gotten over the idolatry thing, I've gotten over that issue, and but that if you have anything in regards to that, how to understand that more, that would be helpful.
Why don't we send you?
But I just really appreciate your response, because I know when I found a picture of Mother Mary the other day in a book, a little address book I've had for over 20 years, and I said, that's it. That's why that the Chapel of Divine Mercy and doing the Rosary and everything has helped me so much in these last couple of months, when I decided I've got to get back to the way that I was feeling good, and I just feel good being Catholic.
God bless you, Hope. I'm going to send you that little book that we have called 20 Answers Mary, and we, let's send her 20 Answers the Rosary too, because we have both of those, and you have expressed this interest, and you do pray the Rosary. So I'll send you both of those books, Hope, if you'd like them. Can we mail to the Panhandle of Texas? I know we can mail to most of Texas, but U.S. mail goes there to the Panhandle. Okay, all right, we'll send that off to you. Hang on, Hope. Right back with more Why Aren't You Catholic? With our good friend and guest, Michael Lofton, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley of the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Do you love praying for people? Have you ever wanted to use your gift of prayer to share Jesus with others and build up the body of Christ? Start a public prayer station with St. Paul Street Evangelization. Listen to people's needs, pray with them, or invite them to meet you at church. St. Paul Street Evangelization can help you get started. Find out how at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
EWTN, helping people grow in their love and understanding of God.
Praise your ministry. I went back to the church after 30 years of staying out of the church, after finding your radio station and ministry on terrestrial radio. It wasn't even the internet. And I've been back and I've been evangelizing, and using some of your responses to questions.
Hey, you want a free book by a pretty reliable guy on the chaos in the church? You can get it over at reasonandtheology.com. You can get it free. Our guest, Michael Lofton, wrote this book for you if you're struggling with this time of chaos and crisis. No, it's not a time of crisis, a time of crises in the church. Then you can get the book. It's called Church Chaos, and it's available at reasonandtheology.com. Go there and get it for yourself. But if you want to talk with Michael about why you're not Catholic, today is your chance to do that. 888-318-7884 is the number. Going back to Texas, Bernie, Texas. It's currently living in Colorado. Thomas, we're glad you're here. Why aren't you Catholic?
Brady, Texas.
That's where you're from, Bertie, Texas?
Hello. Brady.
Well, Thomas, you are actually on the air with Michael Lofton. So if you want to let us know why you are not Catholic, we'd love to hear it.
Well, it's my family that I'm concerned about, because I'm Catholic. But,
okay.
I've got a question for the anybody and everybody.
Go ahead with your question.
How do you get apocalyptical weather without the apocalypse? And
how do you get
the Catholic Church? And without the Catholic Church.
So are you having trouble explaining the Catholic view of the apocalypse to people?
No, I'm just saying. I'm talking about like the weather. On the radio at KNEL Brady. The Heart of Texas. That's the Heart of Texas.
I got to be honest with you, Thomas. I'm not exactly sure where it's going. So this is what I'm going to where the question or the point is going. So this is what I would like to do. I'm going to send you back to Siobhan, who's on the phone, and we'll see if we have anything that we publish that could be helpful to you. Because I have to be very honest with you, Thomas. I'm having trouble following today exactly where that point was going. So can you let Siobhan know, Darren? Yeah. Okay. So because I want to be helpful, Thomas, but I just feel like I can't be helpful at the moment because I didn't follow, and that's me. But when I can't follow, I got to move on. Did you want to say something, Michael?
I wasn't following either, but I can highly recommend the YouTube videos that, again, are for free by Jimmy Akin here on Catholic Answers on the Book of Revelation. There's all kinds of clips that Catholic Answers has put out that I found to be incredibly helpful in deciphering the complexities of the Book of Revelation. So certainly check those out.
Oh, wonderful. A wonderful suggestion. Thomas, hang on, and we'll see if there's a book or anything that we can send you that will be helpful. I'm going to go to Joseph in Seattle, Washington, watching on YouTube. Joseph, why aren't you Catholic?
Hi, both of you. It's a pleasure to speak with Michael. Reason and Theology is just a wonderful YouTube channel.
I'm glad it's a pleasure to speak with Michael. I'm very glad to hear that.
Oh, sorry.
No, Joseph, that makes me very happy that it's a pleasure for you to speak with Michael. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Just giving you a hard time.
Well, just a brief, my childhood, I had a very blessed church life. I was homeschooled and was very involved in my local church. I was a cradle Catholic, and I daily mass pretty much my entire life because I was homeschooled and my church didn't have a school attached to it. I was an altar server, so daily mass, daily rosary, pretty much my entire life. I mean, just very, very blessed. Just a very conservative Catholic upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that, so I was very, very attached to the church.
Okay.
And one thing that stuck, I mean, like, just had a very deep love for the church, with Mary, with God. Just, you know, I thought I was going to become a priest. So I was with an organization called Regnum Christi, and I went to a pre-seminary run by the Legionaries of Christ. Just a very orthodox. It was beautiful. So I had a great training. One thing that stood out to me was the phrase that the church is a living church, that it kind of grows and moves with society. And that I just recall trying to understand what it was like before each change was made. So that's kind of where my struggles began.
Okay.
Was Holy Tradition.
Well, is there something that Michael could help you? Because Michael is actually, this is exactly
definitely.
what he does. So
Yeah.
I'm just very
going
aware of
back
the
to
clock.
Holy Tradition.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
No, we're getting near
I'm
the
almost
end.
there.
Go ahead.
Oh, got you. So Holy Tradition, you have 6 or 7 main churches. One church makes a stand. The other churches say, you're way off the mark. And then the Crusades happen. The other church wipes out the other ones, steals their artifacts, kills, rapes, decimates.
You're talking about
and then all of a sudden
Constantinople.
everything's translated into Latin. And they burn their libraries, they burn their culture, and anyway. So
I just so that I know what you're talking.
can
It
you
does seem
paraphrase
like,
what I'm
Joseph, that you're talking about the sack of Constantinople by Latin Christians. Is that what we're talking about?
not just Constantinople,
but the
Jerusalem, Egypt. Basically, you have one church says we need to white out every other idea
Michael, can you respond to that? I'm going to let Michael respond, and I'll come back to you if we have time, Joseph, just because we're getting near the end. Michael?
Yeah, I don't think that that's very historically accurate. By the way, check out Stephen Weinkampf's book, published here by Catholic Answers, on the Crusades. I found that very helpful. But yeah, I don't find that to be historically accurate as far as the exchange between Catholics and Orthodox. First of all, I mean, with the sack of Constantinople, you already have the Venetian Crusaders who are sacking them are already excommunicated, and they're doing it contrary to the Pope's instructions. And then you had atrocious behavior from the Orthodox against Western Christians a few years before the Fourth Crusade. Now, there are sins on both sides, but I'm not aware of anyone wiping out the tradition or of the other and just not tolerating any kind of diversity in opinions. I think that that's more of a straw man of a very, very, very long and complex history. So yeah, I'm not. I guess I'm not buying the picture that you painted there. Ultimately,
but is it? I mean, you talked about Regnum Christi. You talked about the legionaries. There is a certain kind of a very masculine presentation of the church among these things. It does seem like a kind of dominating Catholic Church is what has driven you out, and that this is an image of that kind of dominating view of the Catholic Church. Am I in the ballpark, Joseph, or is there something else that you wanted us to get to?
Papal supremacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, papal supremacy properly understood is a very good and biblical thing. It's certainly not something that is abusive and is there to wipe out any other ideas. Papal supremacy properly understood by the Catholic Church is that the Pope ultimately has this role of leadership in the exact same way that St. Peter had a role of leadership among the apostles. So when we look at Peter's supremacy over the other apostles, nobody could in good conscience, in my opinion, argue that somehow the New Testament is supporting this idea that Peter wanted to wipe out everybody else's ideas and he's just reigning as a tyrant or something like that. That's certainly not the case in the New Testament. And that's all we're claiming whenever we speak of papal supremacy. We're saying in the same way there's a leadership of Peter among the apostles, the Bishop of Rome, the successor of Peter, is a leader among the other bishops. But it's certainly not something that has to be exercised like a tyrant or something like that. It's a good thing. It's a helpful thing.
All right, I do have a little bit of time, so I'm going to come back to you because I'm just trying to. I want you to get whatever help we can give, Joseph. So where do we stand now?
I mean, I love the church, and it's decimated. I don't know if there's a book that could help with that.
What do you mean? You said it's decimated. Can you just quickly elaborate on that?
I mean, you've got the East and the West. Mm-hmm. As far as I understand it, just based on my own conversion into Eastern Orthodoxy, it's a completely different religion. I mean,
Catholicism and Orthodoxy?
I mean, yes.
Oh no, I beg to differ. Not even close.
Well,
not even close.
I'm a cradle Catholic, and I had to learn extreme differences when it came to the Trinity. Basically, I had to learn the whole thing over. So I understand if you think it's not even close, but they're 100% night and day differences theologically.
So, I know that there's some Orthodox. Yeah, just to quickly answer your question, because I know we're up against the clock. I know there's some Orthodox that present it that way, but I think that's a straw man. I have a ton of videos engaging Eastern Orthodoxy on my Reason and Theology channel if you want to check them out. By the way, we will soon, I don't have a date yet, but Catholic Answers will be publishing my book, Answering Eastern Orthodox Objections to Catholicism. Look for that soon.
Also, Joseph, there's a kind of a very, very rigorous Catholicism that can be challenged and needs to be challenged by the gentleness of Christ, by the peace that we find in Christ, which doesn't eliminate the moral law or anything like that, but gives us a fuller kind of thing. And I would like to recommend a talk that we've just posted from Dan Burke about coming from the occult to the Catholic Church. because I feel I sense a hunger for a balance for that very rigorous Catholicism. If that would be helpful to you, check it out. I do want to thank our guest, Michael Lofton. Always wonderful. I wish we could have had 10 more hours, especially to talk to Joseph. Thank you, Michael.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, what about converting to the Catholic faith from Mormonism? That's next. Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. I am Cy Kellett, your host, and I'm so glad you're here with us. I hate this part of the week. I hate this part of the week because I know it's almost over, and then I got to wait before I get to do this again. But at least we're ending on a strong note. This is going to be a really, really good hour. I've already gotten to meet Jeremy Christensen, our guest this hour, and what a wonderful, fine, engaging person. And your calls are welcome if you'd like to talk with him. He's the author of this book, From the Susquehanna to the Tiber, a memoir of conversion from Mormonism to the Roman Catholic Church. If you would like to talk about that, if that topic grabs you, if you'd like to get in on the conversation in any way at all, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884, 888-318-7884. Jeremy grew up in a small Mormon town in Utah. You'll be surprised to hear that there are Mormon towns in Utah, perhaps, but apparently there are. He converted to Roman Catholicism just a few years ago, about 5 years ago. He's a graduate of Southern Utah University, and he's got a law degree. And this book is a wonderful book. You should check it out. From the Susquehanna to the Tiber. Jeremy Christensen, thanks very much for being here with us for a Friday afternoon.
Thank you for having me on. It's good to be back.
Yeah, we've spoken before on Catholic Answers Focus, our podcast. You should check that out. I was very engaged by that conversation, and I'll tell you something. This doesn't often happen with us, but the president of Catholic Answers, after that came into my office and goes, "What a great conversation that was! That guy is fascinating." So I'm now I got you all built up for the hour.
Yeah, hopefully I don't disappoint.
No, you better not. Let me just put it that way. You better not. 888-318-7884 is the number. 888-318-7884. So what's it like growing up a Mormon in a little Mormon town in Utah? In some ways, it sounds kind of idyllic. I mean, Mormons are lovely people, and Utah is a lovely state.
Right. It's the first answer that came to my mind was, not too bad. It is a great place to grow up. A very small town, maybe 3,000 people, give or take. A really tight knit community. Probably 80% or more are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church. My parents were very devout, still are very devout, and all of my siblings but one are still devout members of the LDS Church. My parents had 7 children, and it's a great place. The LDS Church obviously instills really good family values. Family is very, very important. Our community was very strong, and the church is just sort of the LDS Church is integrated into the way that I grew up. It's just a massive part of not just something that happened on Sunday, but socialization all of the time. Almost all of my neighbors were, members of our congregation, and we would have youth activities during the week, multiple times during the week, and church on Sunday, which is at that time was 3 hours long, so it was an event. And it was good. It was a good place to grow up, and my parents were. I think it's probably not too much different than growing up as a devout Catholic. Prayers every morning and every night, and we would read from the Book of Mormon every day as a family, and religion was a very important part of our life. Took it very seriously, not in a kind of like a weird way or an overbearing way. It was just kind of the way things were, and it was a good growing up.
So why did you leave it? Why did you come to the Catholic Church?
Yeah, so that was a long journey. I mean, I was born in the late 80s and was member to a devout family for a very, very long time. And I did, I had some wild teenage years, pretty wild, in fact. But by the time I was about done with high school, I had kind of had my own personal conversion to Mormonism, and was deeply, deeply convinced that it is true, that it is the one true restored church of Jesus Christ and led by a living prophet. And I did, all the things I was supposed to do. I served a 2-year mission in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and came back, and I married a beautiful, wonderful young Mormon girl, and we were married, sealed for time and eternity in the Los Angeles, California temple. It's there on Santa Monica Boulevard. And we started our family, and we lived the kind of life my parents taught me how to live. And we were very involved and engaged in the LDS Church, and volunteered a whole lot. That is a big part of being a member of the LDS Church, is that congregations are run completely by the local congregation. Everybody's a volunteer, and that's how you make things run. But it wasn't until I was in law school that I really started to kind of recognize. It's easier to recognize now in retrospect, but at the time started to have fissures in my faith come up, and they came from two different sources that conjoined at the same time. The one source was kind of in the greater Mormon atmosphere in, say, 2013, 14, 15. There was a lot going on in terms of accessibility to early Mormon history on the internet. A lot of reaction to that. You started to see all of these news stories about younger members of the church leaving the LDS Church, and some of the high leadership sort of organizing events to kind of address it specifically. There were some high-profile excommunications of a couple of people at the time, John DeLynn, Kate Kelly, who were kind of pretty prominent voices questioning certain aspects of Mormon history or doctrine or teaching. And I mean, I think both of those were even reported in the New York Times. So there's sort of a lot of that going on, and you start to, become curious and kind of unpack and dig a little bit, like, what are these historical issues that people are talking about that have people so concerned? And one of the bigger things is that the LDS Church actually, I think, probably realized that the internet really had fundamentally changed its members' access to information that it didn't want those members to have. And reading about early Mormon history in sources that are, not LDS Church approved became very easy. Yeah. And they tried to kind of deal with that by having, church employed scholars write essays that addressed a number of these topics, and that kind of made concessions for the first time in very public ways about things that were disconcerting, that you didn't really think a whole lot about.
But
they could.
I want to stop you there, Jeremy, because I don't know that many Catholics know exactly what you're talking about. In that, what is there in early Mormon history that would disturb someone like yourself, who was raised a Mormon, who was fully immersed, had done 2 years of mission? What's there that would bother you about being a Mormon?
A lot, actually. So, part of it is that you are taught a very, or at least you were. I think I'll just bracket the point that the LDS Church is going through a lot of changes right now, and I think trying to deal with this. But in my growing up, life and generations of Mormons before me, you were taught a very curated, particular history of the founding of the church, of Joseph Smith, of the things he did, of how the Book of Mormon was produced, of how, all of these different events happened, and how the so-called restoration of the gospel occurred through the prophet Joseph Smith. And that is what your belief system is really rooted in, is this belief that he had a vision that he claimed in 1820, where he saw God the Father and Jesus Christ in this vision. And this is part of what, revealed to him that God the Father has a physical body. It was this vision that he claimed occurred in the spring of 1820. And there's kind of an official version that is put in Mormon scripture of that account. And, well, you learn that actually in the historical record, there are like a dozen accounts of that event. Some of them, a handful of them, by Joseph Smith. One of them, the earliest one, written in 1832, written in his own handwriting in a journal, that differs in the details in very, very significant ways about that vision. There was God the Father wasn't there. He only saw the Lord. He wasn't told to restore any church. It was like a vision about him just getting personal forgiveness from Jesus.
Wow.
And it sort of goes on and on and on about how the Book of Mormon was produced. Its connection to folk magic, sort of frontier folk magic and treasure digging and treasure scrying that Joseph Smith was heavily involved in. All of these sorts of things that if you read, say, a standard scholarly account of the time period, you would come away with, well, you might have some questions of how things happened, but you weren't going to come away thinking Joseph Smith was a prophet called by God to restore Christ's one true church. And there's a lot there. The practice of polygamy that Joseph Smith instituted in officially kind of beginning in the 1840s, but that he was having extramarital dalliances as early as 1836. When there wasn't a theological framework in place for the concept of polygamy that he would later develop. All of these things sort of paint a picture, and it's never one thing, right? It's sort of the opportunity to go through and look and read a lot of this, and then to see kind of a holistic totality, a different picture of those facts when it kind of clicks with you.
So you begin to be undermined in the idea that Joseph Smith was a prophet.
Yeah.
But what is he in your mind at this point? What do you begin to see him as?
At that point, so as I mentioned, there were kind of these two conjoining things. The one, were sort of personal spiritual struggles, and the other, these historical problems. But when I read the historical stuff, it wasn't very long before I was like, whatever else he wasn't what I was taught.
Yeah.
Like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not what it claims to be. I don't know what else it is. I at this point, your entire sort of metaphysical, spiritual, moral rug is pulled out from under you. It's a very horrific experience that,
it's funny,
but
it sounds like kind of the opposite of what Catholic apologists who are constantly telling people, there's writing from the first century, you should read it. Like, you should read what Polycarp has to say. You should read what Clement has to say. Like, these are things, and then people don't read it. Whereas you're saying in the Mormon church, it's more like, we'd rather you didn't read this stuff. We'd prefer you stay away from the earliest documents.
For sure, definitely. And that's because, there's a funny question. People will ask, what do Mormons believe? And, frankly, the answer is really complicated. Because you could say, there's a great historical book by a late scholar named D. Michael Quinn called Origins of Power, the Mormon Hierarchy, Origins of Power. And it's about the development, I don't want to use that word because that has a good meaning, a correct meaning in Catholicism and a meaning that's different in how I'm using it here. I would say the evolution of concepts of priestly authority and structure and the concept of the church in Mormonism through its earliest years. And the author makes this really, poignant comment that it's not that there was like a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It's more like that there are many churches of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, because it went through such a heavy evolution of doctrinal belief, even contradictory, that it's hard to pin down to say, okay, well, what exactly do they believe? So you will have, for instance, a time, when in the Utah period after the death of Joseph Smith, when Brigham Young, right, famous Brigham Young is in charge of the Mormon church in Utah when it's a territory. And he introduced a really radical idea that was actually really controversial, but was widely believed and taught for a long time, most of his presidency up through the late 1870s, was that he taught that Adam is God, that Adam is like the father of our spirits and our mortal bodies, and that Mormonism has a complex cosmology of polytheism, of many gods, and that the creation story is really about Adam, who has reached godhood, like coming down to earth to begin his spirit children who will worship him as God. And that obviously like doesn't even square with all of Mormon scripture, right?
Yeah.
And so it was controversial, but was widely believed and still is believed. You can see it because when the Mormon Church broke off or cut short the practice of polygamy in the late 19th and early 20th century, and finally was like, we don't do polygamy anymore.
Yeah.
It caused a schism. And a group broke off. There are fundamentalists, right? Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and other groups that still to this day practice polygamy. And a lot of their beliefs reflect that earlier time period. And they believe this Adam that they call in Mormonism, that's called the Adam God theory.
Jeremy, I got to take the break, so I'm going to do that to take the break. If you would like to get involved in this conversation, whether you're Mormon or Catholic or otherwise, if you'd like to know how someone comes from being a happy, well-adjusted Mormon child to a Mormon missionary, all the way out of Mormonism into the Roman Catholic Church, you are welcome to call 888-318-7884. We'll continue our conversation with Jeremy Christensen, the author of From the Susquehanna to the Tiber, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
The most original and exclusive Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
Hosting Women Made New has helped me deepen my own faith, and I look forward to every weekend having those in-depth discussions with my guests. It's been such a blessing being a part of the EWTN family and carry on the mission that Mother Angelica started.
Women Made New, Saturday noon Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back. Catholic Answers Live. I was just asking our guest, Jeremy Christensen, who grew up in a Mormon family and is now a Catholic, about the caffeine thing. And apparently that's somewhat controversial, too. Maybe we'll get to that, about whether Mormons can or cannot consume caffeine. The Church of the Latter-day Saints. One of the things that I learned from you in this book and from our previous conversation is that it's what we see today as Mormonism is not 19th century Mormonism. That this is maybe a post-war phenomenon, or it's something else. Help me understand what Mormonism is today and where it came from.
Yeah. So Mormonism is rooted really interesting. I mean, somebody could make something really interesting out of this if they really studied it. But Mormonism is rooted in this concept of continuous revelation. So for Catholics, right, we believe that there's public revelation, private revelation, and the public revelation ended, in the first century, and that the truth has been, once delivered to all of us, and that private revelations may happen, but they're not, altering the core message, the revelation of God in the person of Jesus. Mormonism, though, looks at the question and says, no, what happens is God is just sort of continuously changing things up, and he has a prophet, and that's the person he tells, what needs to be happening for right now. And that even really, gets down to like doctrine, if you really think about it. And so, the Mormon Church has gone through a lot of different phases. It was sort of like a seeker movement, very spiritual gifts oriented, and frankly, kind of a Protestant offshoot in its very earliest iteration. And then it quickly changes into something quite different. And by the time you get to the 20th century, where the church finally kind of agrees with the United States government from a long continuous pressure campaign by the government that they will no longer practice polygamy. That was a huge part of their theology. And they kind of go on this thing where they assimilate a bit into American culture. And one of the really good illustrations of this is they moved from the president of the church. They all had beards at the time. Nothing against your beard side. They all had beards at the time. And then in the mid 50s, David O. McKay becomes the president of the LDS Church, and he looks like a 50s businessman. He has this bright, kind of charismatic white shock of hair, clean shaven, and he often wears these white linen suits. And they kind of had a real big PR push. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir starts to go and like sing all over the country, and they're very good. They're very talented.
Yeah.
And Mormonism in this post polygamy era starts to really try and at once distinguish itself from other religions, because it's got to do its own thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they start to kind of take on a lot of traditional Protestant trappings to fit in, to assimilate in American culture, because obviously, being polygamous families with multiple wives, out in the desert was not exactly like
didn't go big with the Baptists,
right?
They weren't down for that.
Let alone like the main lines, right?
Yeah, right.
In the Northeast, so they had that, and Mormonism really took off and became this sort of all-American religion,
right? Yeah, I remember when I asked you about it, I said Mormonism seems to me like its roots are in a kind of congenial 19th century Americanism, and you said, well, actually, that comes a little later. That's an affectation. I shouldn't say affectation, but that's a kind of persona that came later to Mormonism.
Yeah, and they've been. I think Mormonism's has proven itself to be a pretty nimble organization in its 200 or so years of existence, and I think that they are currently also on a trajectory where they are continuing to evolve, and their teachings will continue to evolve. I think that's baked in, frankly, to the theology.
Well, it does. So the internet brought this whole ability of people to kind of look into to real Mormon history, and this created a crisis for many. That seems like that's what happened to you. Created a crisis.
Yeah.
So I get the leaving Mormonism, because it does seem to me like what you came to was the conclusion: Mormonism is not true, and has not told the truth about itself. But before I go to the calls, and I am going to go to calls because people want to talk to you about this stuff, and you're welcome to call if you want to get in on this, 888-318-7884. What brought you to the Catholic Church, though? Like I think many Mormons that have a similar story to yours, they just give up on religion altogether. I've noticed that phenomenon.
It is an alarmingly frequent occurrence that people who leave Mormonism either become, not affiliated with anything or become atheists. And I think part of that is the pain of it, to just like empathize with those people, because I've been there. It is a really awful thing to have your whole worldview kind of ripped apart from you so painfully. It's really awful. And so at some level, I can empathize with the fact that a lot of people just say, like, my whole concept of God was wrapped up in this, so no thank you. my number one answer for why I became a Catholic, or what drew me to Catholicism, is God's grace, to just put it very simply, because it's nothing that I wasn't looking for. It's not what I set out to do. And it is seriously the last thing on earth I ever would have thought of doing, even at the time that I left the LDS Church. I wasn't looking to join another church. It was just, these small kind of interactions of providence, right, through my life kind of led me ultimately to Catholicism.
We'll have to get the rest of the story after the break, because we got to take the break. Right back after this. Are you ready to defend your faith in a world of unbelief? Join us at the 9th Annual Catholic Answers Apologetics Conference. This year's theme, I Believe in God, and it'll help you provide clear and charitable answers to atheism, agnosticism, and plain old indifference. Don't miss what promises to be the event of the season. Join us in San Diego from September 21st through 24th as we welcome our special guest, Dr. Scott Hahn, and an all-star lineup of great Catholic speakers. Spend quality time with your favorite Catholic Answers apologists and enjoy 4 days of fun, fellowship, and adoration of the Almighty. Seats are still available, but they're going fast. Visit CatholicAnswersConference.com or call 888-291-8000 to register. Enter promo code EARLY and save $50. That's CatholicAnswersConference.com.
Want to know more about the origins of the Catholic Church? Joe Heschmeyer explores the beginnings of Christianity. In the early church was the Catholic Church. Joe digs deep into the words and actions of those who lived right after the apostles to refute anti-Catholic claims of how the faith was lived back then. Order your copy of The Early Church Was the Catholic Church today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
If you're not a Bible scholar, the full message of how the Sunday Mass readings fit together can be tough to comprehend. Apologist Carlo Broussard is here to help. Join Carlo every Friday for the Sunday Catholic Word podcast. In each episode, he unpacks the scripture readings for that Sunday and brings them all together so you can better understand and defend the faith. Visit SundayCatholicWord.com to subscribe. That's SundayCatholicWord.com.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. We're talking with Jeremy Christensen, the very engaging author of a wonderful book, From the Susquehanna to the Tiber. It's his memoir of conversion from Mormonism to the Catholic Church. You're welcome to call and get in the I've said you can get in on the conversation, and I know I haven't gone to people yet, but I'm just going to finish letting Jeremy tell me why he ended up in the Catholic Church, and then it's going to be just caller after that, I promise. So by God's grace, you said, signs and intimations of Catholicism, and that's where we left it.
Yeah, so it really got off the ground when I stumbled across the Church Fathers, who were people I had not heard of, let alone read. And I heard about these people and just thought it was very interesting. Oh, who are the people who kind of lived earliest to Christianity outside of the New Testament? What do these people think? That's a very interesting group of people to look at. And so I acquired those writings and just started reading them, and it didn't take long to become intellectually convinced that whether Catholicism was true or not, whether it's like theological claims are true, that Catholicism is historically, as a fact, the thing that happened in the first century, the thing that came from the thing that Jesus and his apostles started doing.
Yeah, right. And there's a continuity, in other words, with Jesus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, and that's why we want people to read those documents, and I think why a lot of people don't read them. Because it's very hard to miss that Polycarp is of the same religion that John the Apostle was, and John the Apostle is of the same religion that Jesus founded.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There is this strong continuity, and that's what made me like, oh gosh, I kind of still think of myself in Christian terms, but like, I don't believe all the things these people did. That seems like a problem. And that set me off to investigating. And, I was drawn by a lot of things from there to join the church later.
Well, we got a lot of people who'd like to talk with you. Do you mind if we go to the phones now, Jeremy?
Let's do it.
You've been putting it off as long as you can. It's time for you to get to work. Jeremy Christensen's our guest. The book is From the Susquehanna to the Tiber. It's by our good friends at Ignatius Press. Your call's welcome, 888-318-7884. We start in Murrieta, California, listening to EWTN. On Channel 130, Sirius XM satellite radio is Cecil in Murrieta, California. Cecil, welcome. Go ahead with your question or comment for Jeremy Christensen.
Yes, Jeremy, I was wondering if you saw any parallels between Mormonism and I call it kind of an American version of Islam, because I am fascinated by the parallels. I mean, there are multiple. The manifest destiny economics sort of idea of how that was, the polygamy, the ideas of the different levels of heaven, the God. I mean, the virgins that you're going,
the sexual aspects, in other words. Yeah, there's very right.
Has anybody ever done a doctoral dissertation on the parallels? Because to me, it's a fascinating. The little that I've dabbled in studying both of these religions. So I just was wondering what your thoughts are.
Yes. So the short answer, I would say, I don't know if someone's done a doctoral dissertation on it. I would be completely shocked if someone hasn't written something. Maybe to your surprise, I would be shocked if a faithful Orthodox Mormon had not done comparisons between the two religions. Mormonism often will speak highly of Muhammad and sort of has a general speak highly of different faith traditions. But more concretely, there are a lot of parallels between Mormonism and Islam, right? Joseph Smith claims that an angel of God that he says was named Moroni came to him and showed him where the golden plates were that he would use to translate the Book of Mormon. Obviously, that there's a lot of parallel there to Muhammad's claim that the angel Gabriel, came and delivered the Quran to him. And the as you said, sort of the political kind of nature of the two. Joseph Smith obviously was a very capable organizer. By the time he was killed in the 1840s, Nauvoo, Illinois was a very powerful city. It was huge that he had built up from pretty much nothing. And he had a lot of political power behind him, which is one of the things that was quite concerning to people around him. And so in those ways, and then obviously, as you point out, the sexual ethics of Joseph Smith are at least in certain ways, comparable to those of Islam in terms of polygamy and the like. Joseph Smith claimed that he restored polygamy while he was doing retranslations of the Bible and thought, well, these ancient patriarchs in the Bible practiced polygamy and prayed about it, and God told him that was, part of the fullness of the gospel and needed to be restored. So there really are a lot of parallels, and I would not be surprised if somebody has written quite a bit about them.
All right, Cecil?
Yeah, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks very, very much. The polygamy is a quite notable parallel. And Matt Fradd did a wonderful interview with an expert on Islam about how the importance of that actually in the original spread of Islam. I imagine that it would have a similar effect in Mormonism.
The one break, I would say, like the cleanest break is the Mormonism is not monotheistic, and certainly also does not have, Islam has a rich tradition of sort of classical theism, of philosophical thought that has gone into its conception of the one God.
Yeah.
That is completely different than Mormonism.
Yeah, but it could be easily argued that much of that comes long after Muhammad. Averroes and
sure.
The philosophical kind of Islam comes long after Muhammad. Denise, thanks, Cecil, very, very much. Denise in Columbus, Georgia, watching on YouTube. We're glad you're here, Denise. Go ahead with your question for our guest, Jeremy Christensen.
I'm just curious because when growing up, my favorite group was the Osmonds, who are very Mormon, but they were always such a clean-cut family. I know my mother was probably happy.
Well, they were a little bit country, and they were a little bit rock and roll. You know, they.
Yes. So you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, right.
The screener was like the Osmonds, and I was like, yes.
Oh, that's Siobhan. Anybody? You cannot trust this younger generation to know fine music like the Osmond. But okay.
Well, I just felt them very, very inspirational, and I mean, and I'm a cradle Catholic, so I'm very happy with my religion. But I felt like they had something, too, to keep together as a family.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
It does. Let's get a reaction from Jeremy.
Yeah, you know, the Osmonds, obviously, they are a famous, famous in their own right. They are also Mormon. Donny Osmond, I remember... I think the Osmonds' heyday was a little bit before my time, but Donny Osmond, did Mulan and Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat when I was young, and those were big hits. We liked those in my house. They're fine people, and I think that goes to a greater point about Mormonism and Mormons. They're really good people. My parents taught me really, really good, strong family values, and Mormons do a lot better, frankly, than most everybody else in the United States at keeping family together. And they've been very, very good and successful at that. They have their own challenges in terms of divorce rates and those kinds of things. But I think certainly I try, even as someone who no longer is believes those things, to be as respectful as I can when I engage with Mormonism, because I have untold numbers of friends. My family, my wife's family, none of our family are Catholic. They are all Mormon, staunch Mormon, very devout and good people. So there are, great Mormon people that we can look up to and we could admire. The commonalities that we have with Mormons. I think those are good things to build from. But obviously where we're going to part ways are on the doctrines and what's true and what God intends for us and what he doesn't.
Denise? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I have to admire the family.
Yeah, but
they have been through hard times.
I think that's a good, strong Catholic and generally Christian instinct too. Is that we make a distinction between the person and the whether or not a particular belief is true or not, and people always kind of act like that's not a real thing, but or that's not good enough or something. Like you got to believe what other people believe. We get that a lot from people who are involved in very secular or the new sexual moralities, and where we say, we're not judging people. This is not about judging people. This is about what's true, what's false, what's right, and what's wrong. And there's an awful lot of good that came from the Osmonds, particularly Marie.
Well, and for me here in the South, Southern Baptists do not like. I have been told I was going to hell because I was Catholic.
Yeah, that's not true.
To my face. And, well, I didn't believe it.
I'm glad to hear.
I was a young teenager going, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
So I just feel like, I just, that family just seems so united. They just seem so good that
I feel like you think we're going to give you free tickets to a Donny and Marie concert if you keep this up, Denise. We don't have any free tickets here.
No, I don't want to go see Donnie and Marie. My love was Jay, the drummer. Okay?
All right. Well, Denise, we got to go to a break. Yes, you're okay. More with Jeremy Christensen, the author of From the Susquehanna to the Tiber, a memoir of conversion from Mormonism to the Roman Catholic Church, right after this on Catholic Answers Live.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
We have a big problem. Our culture is dying, and souls are in danger of being lost. The answer is conversion to Jesus Christ in His church. St. Paul Street Evangelization is a Catholic organization, and we have hundreds of teams spreading the good news throughout the country. But we need your help. The harvest is great, but the laborers are few. Find out more and get involved today at streetevangelization.com. That's streetevangelization.com.
Wherever you are in the world, you can access the EWTN Global Catholic Network. It's everywhere. You can get EWTN's great Catholic programming on your car radio, at home on your TV, computer, or smart speaker. With EWTN's app, you can take EWTN everywhere on your phone or mobile device. If you want your news in print, turn to EWTN's paper of record, the National Catholic Register. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
I got to admit, the Osmonds got a little bit out there for me when Donnie started wearing purple socks. I feel like, you know what, sometimes you're just pushing the boundaries, and there's just no reason for that behavior. So, sure, they were wholesome, but come on, Donnie. That's some wild stuff, wearing purple socks. The numbers here is 888-318-7884. Our guest is Jeremy Christensen. His book is, which I hope is finding lots of success at Ignatius Press. It's called From the Susquehanna to the Tiber, a memoir of conversion from Mormonism to the Catholic Church. And one of the features of it, I must say, is a genuine affection for people who are Mormon and for people who are Catholic. There's nothing polemical in this book. It's a genuine and very affectionate memoir. On the line for Jeremy is Derek in Idaho, listening on Salt and Light Radio. Derek, we're glad you're here. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, I worked with a Mormon and studied with him for a little bit, and he told me that they did not believe in Jesus as being God's son, but Jesus was the greatest angel ever made. And that's about it, I think.
So is that the case in Mormon belief? Is Jesus an angel?
So no. They would say that Jesus is the Son of God, but when they say Jesus is the Son of God, they do not mean the same thing that Catholics mean when Catholics say that Jesus is the Son of God. That is, Mormons are not Trinitarian, and so, to be theological about it, they would not say that Jesus is consubstantial with the Father. Rather, for Mormons, Jesus was created. So in that sense, it's sort of like Arianism, that Jesus was created by God the Father, and that all of us are spirit children of God, and that the oldest of those children is Jesus, that Jesus is the oldest spirit child of God. But he is also God, because again, for Mormons, they have a polytheistic religion in which there is more than one God. So they don't draw the Trinitarian distinctions that Catholics and Orthodox Christians do. And so in some sense, from a Catholic perspective, you might say, yeah, the way they describe Jesus sounds like he's an angel, that he's like a created being that God made. But if you were to ask, in my experience, they would affirm, they would say, no, Jesus is the Son of God. But we're all children of God in a very literal sense in Mormonism.
Derek, does that all make sense to you?
Yes, I have one more question, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. Go ahead.
Okay. Did you ever notice any miracles being performed in the LDS Church?
So at the time, I would have said yes, but only in the sense of I think there's a fairly loose understanding what's miraculous. Like, did I believe that I had prayers answered or that I saw people get healed? Yes, but not the way I would think about it now. For me to say that somebody was healed now, I would be talking about something very, very big, like inexplicable as to how that happened. For Mormonism, if someone, says a prayer or a blessing of healing over someone who's sick, like you just ordinary sick, and they get better, like they will see it as a direct consequence of this healing blessing going on. So in that sort of sense, I would have seen that. But from now as a Catholic, would I say I ever saw a miracle? No.
Derek, I'm going to leave it there because there are several other folks who would like to talk with Jeremy. I do want to recommend his book, From the Susquehanna to the Tiber, a memoir of conversion from Mormonism to the Roman Catholic Church. The name is Jeremy Christensen. The press is Ignatius Press. I'm going to go to Matthew now in Velton, Texas, listening on the Catholic Answers Live app. Matthew, thank you for the call. Go ahead with your question for Jeremy.
Hi, Jeremy, and hi, everybody. So I guess I had a question because I had a pretty similar story, although I stopped going to the Mormon church when I was like in my early teens, and but I guess my question was, did you have to get rebaptized in the Catholic Church? Because later in my early 20s, I always had a pretty favorable opinion for the Catholic Church, and I ended up getting married to a girl that was that was Catholic, and so I went through the the classes and joined the Catholic Church, but they accepted my Mormon baptism, and I think I read something just the other day on the Catholic Answers app that said it didn't really count, and I was like, shit, maybe I was like, something I was going to talk to my priest about. I was going to be like, do I need to get rebaptized? I mean, because
your biography probably covers a divide or a period of change in the Catholic view on Mormon baptism. Do you want to take that, Jeremy?
Yeah. So I am not an expert on the particulars of the Church's canon law and its stance as to what it did before a certain period of time, what it did after a certain period of time. But as of today, I was baptized. I was rebaptized. Technically, I was not rebaptized because today the Catholic Church stance is that Mormon baptisms are not valid. So I had never been baptized, and I was baptized when I became Catholic. That's a consequence of a dubia that was submitted to the Vatican back in, I think, the early 2000s when they responded that, Mormon baptisms are not valid. But prior to that time, I don't know how they were handled, and I don't know how quickly that, message got out there after that was issued either.
Yeah, I think that was 2001. I may have the year wrong, but were you received into the Catholic Church before 2001, Matthew?
It was actually 2001. I'm 54 now, and it's like, I think it was like 22, and so yeah. Well, no, actually, it was like it was 91. Yeah, sorry about that. It's been a long.
I mean, if you have any,
a long time.
I don't know the theology of this well, and I wouldn't like to pretend I do. But if you have any anxiety about it, you can just ask your bishop. You can call the bishop, tell him you were baptized or you were received into the Catholic Church, and you have a question about the validity of your Mormon baptism. Unless he's a terrible bishop, he'll respond to that question. So, if you'd like any help with that. You can email us at radio@catholic.com, and we'll help you get in touch with your bishop or whoever else you might need to get in touch with to know. But If you were received into the Catholic Church, I would have good confidence. But if you're worried about it, we'll help you with it. radio@catholic.com. Send us an email there. And I'm only moving because there are so many people who want to talk to Jeremy Christensen, the author of From the Susquehanna to the Tiber, a memoir of conversion from Mormonism to the Roman Catholic Church. And I want to go to Ann in Vancouver, Washington, listening on 88.3 in that's FM in Portland. Ann, glad you're here. Go ahead with your question for Jeremy Christensen.
Yes, thank you. Several years ago, a neighbor told me that Mormon women are very stressed because they're told by their stake or their church that they have to do certain things. They have to be very involved in the church, or they have to take, serve in ministry, things like that. And what would your comment be on that?
Yeah. So I don't know that I could speak to, say, like general stress levels among LDS women, or that I've seen like empirical studies or something. I will say that I alluded to this earlier. At the local level, like you mentioned, the stake, which would be something kind of akin to a diocese, and then a ward would be like a parish. But at that level, the Mormon Church is run by its rank and file members. They do not have a professional clergy except at the very, very top of the organization. And so a congregation runs every Sunday, everything, every activity, every youth group, all of it is being done voluntarily, except that members believe that the leader of, say, the ward, the bishop that they call, that he receives revelation to say, God wants you to serve as the nursery leader, or God wants you to serve on such and such committee. And so they receive these callings, and people, accept them. And it is a lot of involvement, and can be stressful, certainly. And some people say it's pretty high demand. I think it is certainly more high demand in my experience than being Catholic, in that there can be pressure to participate, to help run all of these different things. But my own personal view is I don't judge that harshly, because it's actually one of the ways, while there can be some negative consequences from it, it's actually one of the reasons I think that Mormons have such high activity levels among their members, and such strong commitment. So I think it kind of cuts both ways. But have I seen it contribute to stress of both men and women? Yes, it contributed in some really severe ways in my own life. So,
thank you very much for the question. Can you say something about that, about the stress that you experienced yourself? What is the stress? What's the...
Yeah, so when I was in law school, sort of having this faith crisis time, I had been called as the elders quorum president of our ward. I was in charge of an immense amount of stuff, outside of attending law school every night, like taking care of people's temporal needs, visiting people who couldn't pay their rent, people who needed food, like you're running a program where everyone has to visit every single family in the ward. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of people, conducting interviews with people, organizing classes. It's a ton of work. And, I'm in law school. I had at that point like 3-4 very small children, and caused some burnout at that time.
That makes sense. Well, Jeremy, thanks very much. I really do appreciate it. It's not a topic we get to talk about all that much, but I'm very glad we have you to speak about it in such a reasoned and helpful way. I hope you will come back. I do want to recommend the book to people again, Jeremy Christensen's book, From the Susquehanna to the Tiber. It's from Ignatius Press, and it's a memoir of conversion from Mormonism to the Roman Catholic Church. Jeremy, will you do this again with us sometime?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to.
All right. That does it for us. Saddest moment of my week. Oh, that's all right. We'll be back at this soon. See you next time, God willing, right here on Catholic Answers Live.